think that'll work for right now. Go to our event graph. Okay, so right here, we have no idea when our capture point is going to be loaded in. If you remember, the capture point, basically, the capture point in the world tells this widget what it is, and this widget very well will probably be loaded in long before, well, maybe not long before, but it could be loaded in before the capture point. So let's go ahead and make sure this thing is ready. So similar to how we've done the game state, we're gonna check that the capture point's ready. So let's do it. Make an event. And I just said wait for a init. You could say wait for capture point. Init was for initialization. You could whatever you think is appropriate here, especially when you're going to add more stuff to this. You might want it to say something different. Add a call to your parent. Okay, capture point. We'll just do a validate. Oop, convert to a validated get. Then we can say init complete. And the reason we don't have to cast or anything, remember, is because the capture point itself is setting it. So we're just waiting for whenever this is going to happen. If it doesn't happen, we can say set timer pick by event. Wait for init. And just so you know, if you didn't already, everything on a widget is not server. Obviously, if the player is a server, then yeah, okay, it's going to happen there. But it is there's no need for server checks here. These widgets are client only. Okay, so when the capture point is ready, we want to do some stuff. We're going to go ahead and set the point name. So let's get our point name. This is the point name that we'll set on the capture point once we place it in the world. And we want to propagate that to the widget. And that's what we're doing. Did we make a... we didn't make... Yeah, let's go ahead and make a function called setPointName. And what point name is going to be, you can see we don't have any variable over here called that. So go back to our designer. And that Z we made, we just need to click this right here. And we'll call it point name. That's the name of the, whoops, didn't mean to do that. The name of the point. Come back over here. You could make an argument that you should validate this. I don't think you need to. Stuff included like this, I don't think it's necessary, but we could put it in there. Now, I could run my text right in here, but I have a feeling I want some non-widget stuff calling this down the road. So I'm just going to make it a string. So let's do that. And we'll say in point name string. And then I'll convert to a text. Whenever possible, you should work with strings over text, and you should work with f names over strings. I mean, because it's just and you got to be careful there too, because you can lose some data going from f name to string, or sorry, from string to f name. But my point saying that is that a text is a lot bigger and bulkier and it costs more to work with ftext or text than it does to work with string. So anything that calls set point name, it just makes it easier just to have it as a string. I think you could also do a lot more comparisons, and you could see the functionality of a string is a lot more broad, especially when you're on the native side, alphabetizing and all of these sorts of things. Okay, let's set our point name now. That's already a string, so we can put it in there. And if you remembered, we added a binding event to the capture point for the team progress. So let's find it. Okay, and so basically I said you could subscribe. That's what we're doing by binding. That's another word for it, is subscribing to that event. So basically anytime the points team progress changes, we're going to fire off an event. This is better than having the widget pull. They call it pull when you're checking over and over again. It's better to bind to events like this than to check over and over and over again, because if you set up a binding, and you can do it in the designer, you could take this and you could set up a binding. One of these things sets up a binding, and it will basically on a tick, an internal tick will check over and over and over again for that value to change. It's not very efficient. So we do it this way, much better. And the cool thing is it sends through team progress. Obviously, we could just go to our point and get team progress, but it's just a cleaner way to do it, to have the value fed through, and that's why we did that. Now, as I said before, anytime you start doing bindings, it's good to immediately set up your unbindings. So we have an event construct. That's like the begin play. But pre-construct's great too if you need something run while you're designing to make sense. We don't have any of that functionality, so I'm not going to cover it. But if you need something to be updated while you're designing, that's what you would do. But we're going to do an event destruct. And that's like your end play. Our capture point. You could do that, but we're just going to say I like to be specific. You don't have to, but you saw that was in all events. I just want to be, I'm only dealing with one, so I'm just going to be like, hey, just this. And that's to prevent crashes and weird behavior as the game tears down. Or maybe as you get rid of the widget. And widgets are weird because they don't leave memory right away. There's not like a destroy function. You just stop referencing them and then they're eventually garbage collected. It's kind of strange. So they can pass valid checks and all sorts of stuff even though they're not on your viewport. Just something to keep in mind. So event destruct. Just shorten it to destruct, and I like to keep those a different color. That's kind of a warning. I don't like that. I definitely like them to stick out so I can keep them separated from the other stuff here. Yeah, my shift key, I swear it's not working. Looks clean. All right. On team progress changed. Okay, so we want to get our player state. So you could cache this value. You could store it, save it. We don't need to do that, though. It's going to be slightly less efficient, but the reason we don't need to do it is because this event's going to fire off multiple times. If for whatever reason we miss it, it's not the end of the world. It will happen again. It's not going to change the game if it doesn't happen. It's not going to change who the winner is or anything like that. It's just your widget. So we can be a little more less concerned with making sure everything is ready. So let's go ahead. We get the owning player. So that what that's going to do is get you the controller. Because your controller, I said it's a great place for UI. Well, it owns all the UI. So let's go ahead and get our player state. Then we're going to cast or capture flag player state. Remember, we don't need to do valid checks when we're casting. It does that for us. Get our player team. Bring this out over here. Do a break. It's like a split, only it has a line connected to it, so we don't have to run a bunch of lines. We can compare these. There. So, if the team progress is equal to our team, we're going to do something different than when it's not. So, a way to handle this would be a good select node. So we have our progress bar. I don't like the name progress bar. Let's go to our designer here and change it. We'll say, let's see. Capture flag process, progress bar. That should work. Okay. We could validate. I don't see the necessity here. It's a widget, included widget. So we're going to set the fill color and opacity. We're going to change if it's our team or not, because the fill color would be different. So we're going to change the color, and then we're going to change the percent of that fill. You saw I was playing with that earlier. I was turning it up and down. It was that blue. We're not going to see the blue. We're going to see whatever we set this color to. If it's our team, it'll be like green. If it's their team, it'll be red. So when you plug that in there, this is like a wild card. It will populate these for you, so you don't have to worry about it. So let's say if it's equal to our team, let's give our team color. It'd be a nice green or whatever you think is teamy. Yeah, there we go. Then if it's enemy, obviously it's going to be red. And that percent will be the progress. Those are going to be solid numbers, though. So this thing wants a percent. Let's multiply it. Usually, I would put a variable in here. Because when you just have numbers, they call them ghost numbers. That's not good to just have that. But for very simple things like ones, zeros, clearly I'm changing this to a percent. I mean, you could put a little note here that says, change 2%. And that would probably pass review. You'd probably, some guys freak out over that. Whatever. It's more clear. If you hide it behind a variable, it might be more hard to read, to see like, well, what is he doing here? What's he multiplying? It's clearly taking it from, instead of 5, it'll 0.05, and that will be into your progress bar as a percent. Because it takes in a value from 0 to 1. If you just put in 5, it would just be full all the time. Another thing I want to bring up, this is really important. Whenever you're doing a select node, if you had a bunch of logic trailing off over here, the select node will, I believe it will run all the logic regardless if it's used or not. So you keep that in mind if you have something that's running both ways. Same with, I want to say, there was another, it was if statements. I'll have to look into it. Blueprint, in code, it would not run a lot of the, like in an if statement, you could put if this, if that, and it'll stop. So if you had like check if a pointer is valid and then get a value from that pointer, you could put it in the same if statement. But in Blueprint, if you put everything in the same, you had a bunch of ands or ors, it's going to run all that logic. So just like that with select nodes. I don't know if that makes sense, but somebody will know what I'm talking about. It's not the end of the world if you don't understand it. Just know that blueprints usually run all the logic that's hooked up. Okay. Let's see. Let's comment that. All right. I think we can try this out. I have to hook something else up, but let's give it a check. Let's see where we're at.